Everyone saying different things to me, different things Ladies and gentlemen, the funeral service for Jenni Roach is to be conducted entirely here in this chapel this afternoon. There is an invitation to you all to join with family for refreshments following the service, and could I ask please that those who have mobile phones turn them off or turn them to silent for the duration of the service. Thank you.
Family and friends, today we honour Jenni Roach by remembering, reflecting upon and celebrating a life filled with the love, respect and admiration of her family and friends. We pay tribute to her contributions to the lives of her loved ones. My name is Marina Whittam and I'm a civil celebrant, and it's my absolute privilege to conduct this service in Jenni's memory. On behalf of Nick, Jess, Ren and Luke, I thank you all for your presence today and for your support over the last week and longer. Having you all here helps them realise how important Jenni was, not only to them but also to others. Possibly the greatest measure of a successful life well lived is your legacy. And it's clear that Jenni's legacy is abundant, and she's left behind many precious and immeasurable gifts, and today is about honouring those gifts. Jenni regarded the major achievement of her life as being the creation of her beautiful and treasured children, Nick, Jess and Ren. She was completely dedicated to them. She devoted her life to ensuring her kids had every opportunity imaginable. She made sure that they tried out every possible activity, from music, arts and crafts to sports. They were, however, not always happy about these activities, and Ren confesses that aside from ball sports, he hasn't excelled in any of them. Jenni was a great mum despite her disability. She loved spending time with her kids, guiding them and patiently explaining everything to them. They say her patience was amazing. Jenni went out of her way to make sure her kids never wanted for anything. And I must say she did a great job because they're absolutely exemplary people. Jenni was born in Warwickshire, England on the 8th of January 1951, the youngest child of three to Vera and Leonard Lloyd. She had a brother Graham and sister Anne, both of whom are here today. Jenni was a little bit younger than Graham and Anne, and perhaps this age gap sort of explains why she was just a little bit different. Life in England in those years was idyllic for a child growing up. Jenni lived on a farm with her parents, brother and sister, with a variety of pets. However, for the prospect of a life with better opportunity, Jenni and her family migrated to Australia with her Aunt Violet, her mum Viv's sister. Jenni initially found her transition to life in Australia a challenge. She had been uprooted from everything that had been familiar at a very tender age and arrived in a country that was completely foreign to her. The family moved into a house in Roslyn Park and later into the family-built duplex which they shared with Violet in Godfrey Terrace, Erindale, and Jenni began at Norwood High School. It wasn't long before she met kindred spirits, Helen Fuller and Pam Barton. Helen is here today and she will shortly share a reading, but sadly Pam was unable to travel from Melbourne to join us today, but she sends her love and thoughts. Jenni, Helen and Pam were the three new girls that year. Helen had just arrived from Melbourne and Pam from Millicent, and they quickly formed a special friendship. Helen tells me they used to tease Jenni about her funny English accent. Jenni had arrived in Australia as a rather unsophisticated little girl, but within a year had transformed into a glamorous woman. Helen remembers Jenni being very fashionable with excellent taste in clothes. She was always beautifully dressed and groomed. Helen and Pam simply couldn't believe this transformation. The girls grew up together and shared many of life's milestones. They laughed together, studied together, had fun together, cried over boys together, and later in life married and had children together. In fact, Jess was almost born at Helen's house when Jenni was visiting one day and her waters broke. Helen recalls that she panicked because Jenni didn't seem in any hurry to get to the hospital, and it took Helen's insistence for Jenni to finally agree that hospital was in fact a good idea. The friends have supported each other and held each other's hands through many wonderful times, but also through many tough times. Helen and Pam were by Jenni's side through her years of ill health. Even though there were times where life took them down different paths and they lost contact for periods of time, their friendship has endured. Jenni didn't initially finish Year 12 at high school. She attended secretarial college instead. She did, however, complete Year 12 subjects later as a mature-age student and gained university entry. While she didn't go to university, she was pleased to know that at least she knew she could. She had many jobs throughout her life. Her first job was at Crossland Accounting on Kensington Road, Rose Park, as a secretary. She worked for many different organisations such as Avis, System Built Homes and Higginbotham Homes. She went on to sing in a band, and she dabbled in promotions and advertising at Westfield Tea Tree Plaza, and she even assisted in the accounting and marketing and promotions for Hair the Musical when it initially toured Adelaide and Brisbane. Jenni married Rod Roach in March 1980, and they welcomed their very much loved first child, Nick, in January 1981. Jenni was very keen to have more children quite quickly, and their darling Jess was born in December 1983 and Ren in February 1986. Sadly, Jenni was diagnosed with MS soon after Ren's birth. It was a challenge that she fought hard to overcome. She was determined not to let it stand in the way of being the best mother she could be. Life was tough for her, but she was strong and tenacious, and she just kept on moving forward with her wonderfully positive attitude. She convinced herself that everything was going to be okay, and when she found out about her illness, she just shrugged her shoulders and said, "Oh well, at least I can now get help in the home, and I can dedicate my time to enjoying my children." And she did. So what of Jenni Roach, the person? Well, Nick, Jess and Ren say their mum was loving and lovable and very much loved by their family and her many friends. They say their mum had an incredible spirit. She was tenacious, determined, and just a little bit rebellious. And this can be evidenced in the way she handled the many challenges life presented her with. Jenni was a very spiritual soul, slightly alternative, and she loved anything supernatural, from numerology and astrology to alternative sciences like the healing power of gems. In fact, Jenni's interest in gems led her to complete a diploma in gemology. She was a free spirit who didn't tend to make plans and just went with the flow. She loved a party, rock and roll, and good fun. She was always loyal and generous with her time and would do anything for her friends and loved ones. Helen says, "You always had to allocate a lot of time when you had things planned with Jenni. She was never in a hurry and she was always late." She had a love of writing. As MS ravaged her body and she found it increasingly difficult to speak, writing became her solace. Her kids say she was an amazing writer and also had some short stories published in a collection of women's writings in 2005. Now, here are some facts you might not know about Jenni. She didn't much like veggies, particularly carrots. She loved sparkling Shiraz. Or was that Shiraz? I can never tell. She was once in a milk sculling competition. Her favourite breakfast was black coffee and biscuits. She kept a journal since she was 13 years old. She entered the Miss Telethon quest to raise money for the disabled in 1969. She hated Celine Dion. But she loved contemporary music, whatever the kids were listening to. She loved writing and reading, and particularly loved the poems of Khalil Gibran. She had a quirky sense of humour and loved corny jokes. And Helen can still remember a joke that Jenni told many years ago, and she and Pam are still scratching their heads, and I'll share it with you, and I apologise, I'm a terrible joke teller. But a man walked past a lady at a bus stop and said to her, "Excuse me, madam, but you have a ladder in your stockings." And she said, "Yes, but I'm not wearing stockings." That was it. I don't get it either. But apparently Jenni found this hysterical and roared with laughter. There is no doubt that life was tough for Jenni, yet her children say she was strong and a beautiful person. She just kept on going regardless. Jenni met her loving and devoted partner Luke in 2005. Their love endured throughout the hardest years, and Luke remained steadfastly by her side until she finally succumbed to her illness a week ago. As I mentioned before, Jenni loved the writings of Khalil Gibran. I think one of his quotes pretty much sums up Jenni's spirit. Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. And now I'd like to invite Helen Fuller forward to share a reading that she has chosen.
Thank you. Before I begin, I'd just like to emphasise that Jenni, Pam and I were quite a threesome growing up, and because we were always waiting for Jen to be ready, we got to know the Lloyd family really well, and so it is with great regret that Pam is not present here today, and she especially asked me to convey her deepest love to the family, and to Luke, and to the Lloyd family. I've chosen to honour Jen today with a verse by David Harkins. It's called "She Is Gone." You can shed tears that she has gone, or you can smile because she has lived. You can close your eyes and pray that she will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that she has left. Your heart can be empty because you can't see her, or you can be full of the love you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember her only that she's gone, or you can cherish her memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, be empty and turn your back, or you can do what she would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Goodbye, my dear friend.
Thanks so much for that, Helen. And now, Nick, I'd like to invite you forward to come and share some words about your beautiful mum.
Oh, thanks, I've got a team. I'll have to apologise. This is probably a little bit longer than it needs to be, but and I might have covered I might be reinforcing some points that were made by Marina. Anyway, thanks for coming along. My name's Nick, and this is Jess and Ren. We're mum's 3 children. I'm generally not shy of a microphone, for those people who would know me, but I'd never pass up the opportunity to speak at my mother's funeral. While I've made speeches in the past, I've never had to speak at a funeral service before, let alone my mother's. So hopefully, I can get through it without some sort of a saline eye eruption. If not, hopefully I can rely on Marina for backup. I'm speaking on behalf of the 3 of us today. The other 2 were worried about a chance of the saline eye eruption. So Jenni Roach, or Mum, was a unique individual with characteristics that were endearing, inspiring, and occasionally also trying, as you would expect from any mother, I guess. Over the course of this eulogy, we'll aim to recall some of Mum's finer characteristics and related anecdotes to provide us with the opportunity to cherish the person that she was. Mum was always young at heart. As a kid, you're ultimately dependent upon your parents, and I guess growing up with this dependence causes kids to believe their parents are really wise, mature, all-knowing experts on life, as I did. However, after facing the reality of Father Christmas at the age of 6, thanks to some careful sleuthing, and by 9, I started to see some evidence of flaws in judgment of our parents. And by the precocious age of 13, I managed to convince myself that I was both more mature and wise than my mother. From this point forward, I was forever nagging her to be more cautious with spending the money that she had, smoke less, of course, and eat more vegetables and get out of bed earlier. While I joke about Mum being less mature than me, her young at heart attitude was refreshing. She was a fun-loving individual with a playful nature who readily connected with people from all age groups and walks of life. This, combined with her emotional intelligence and patience, gave her a unique ability to connect with her teenage kids as they were growing up, which some other parents struggle to do. She didn't like things that were boring and loved the music and fashion of now instead of that of her own youth. From the photos that you'll see later on in this service, you'll see that Mum was lucky enough to have inherited some good-looking genes, which helped her catch the attention of many over the years. Indeed, combining her young-at-heart attitude and good looks provided her with the opportunity to probably bend the truth about her age on several occasions. I only learned the other day that Mum convinced her colleague Peggy, who's sitting with us today, who she studied gemology with, that she was a full 10 years younger than she really was, 35 instead of 45. At one point, she couldn't deal with the lie any longer, so she had to write a long letter to Peggy apologising for deceiving her. But lucky for Mum, and for to the envy of others probably, she retained her looks right until the end. Indeed, when she left her body for a better place last week, Anne, her sister... Is Anne here? Oh, she'll arrive, hopefully. She'll be arriving. I offered to pick her up, but... Anyway... Anne, her sister, remarked that she had not a wrinkle on her face. Hopefully similar genes have been passed our way. Mum, as Marina explained, loved the supernatural and alternative ways of the world. She loved going to clairvoyance and studying astrology and numerology. As a scientist, I could never understand her infatuation with such things, but I let it be. She even claimed to have seen ghosts regularly at Mary Street and loved to read novels with supernatural themes. Aside from being surrounded by ghosts at Mary Street, Mum loved being surrounded by living people of all ages. Mum liked people and people liked Mum. She always had quite a lot of friends, some for a short time in her life and others for a lifetime. She was very generous with her time with her friends. She was someone you could confide in and tell your problems to. She'd always lend an ear when you needed. Mum was a fun-loving individual who always loved to laugh and had a quirky sense of humour. We can't remember how many times we heard her erupting with laughter as she was catching up with her friends at our house. She also had a bit of a peculiar laugh, which I'm not going to mimic now, but we referred to it as the seal laugh, which I think Jess might have inherited. Another small little anecdote, Mum thought it was hilarious to dress up as Santa Claus in the later years of her life. She started to develop this habit, sometime in the early 2000s, and there's a hilarious photo of her in the slideshow dressed up on her scooter on her way to visit Luke's grandchildren. Similar to the Black Knight, who lost all of his limbs in Monty Python and the Holy Grail and claimed, "'Tis but a scratch," Mum regularly refused to acknowledge her impediments and didn't let them get in the way of her life. She routinely refused to use a wheelchair because that's, of course, what disabled people use. So her walking aid of choice was the three-wheeled electric scooter, or gopher. Whenever it was time for a new scooter, she'd call up a series of suppliers and get them to drop around several for a trial, usually all at once, so that we could have races to see which one was the fastest. She hated the slow ones. Mum became a bit of an icon, hooning around only on her scooter over the years. Often she'd be off to the shops dressed in her poncho or what we refer to as a Technicolor dream coat, with a cigarette in hand and a stream of smoke behind her. While we were surprised at Mum's ability to raise three kids and in her condition, it really, I guess, just came out of need. But she did have a few characteristic tools at her disposal to help with this. She was good at dealing with changes, and she adapted quite readily. She wasn't shy of asking for help when she needed it, and she was determined and unwavering, or perhaps tenacious. Telling Mum no, that's too hard, was futile because she couldn't have what she wanted. Telling her she couldn't have what she wanted would only add fuel to her fire. She was always determined to get what she wanted and would hold on tight until she got it. Sometimes this could lead to some fiery interactions, but at the same time, it's a characteristic that helped Mum face the challenges of living with MS and eventually her stroke. The phrase, "where there is a will, there's a way," is a phrase that she would always use. Mum was a bit a bit rebellious. She, to attain her needs and wants, sometimes she had to skirt around the rules a little. Perhaps you could call it being resourceful, like renting the spare rooms at Mary Street without telling the Housing Trust to help supplement her disability pension after some of us had moved out. She also enjoyed an occasional puff of marijuana, which she insisted was purely medicinal for her MS. Luke wanted me to recall a particular story of when she and Luke came to visit Virginia and me when we were living in Perth. And Luke insisted that Mum, shouldn't take any marijuana with her just in case she was sniffed out by the airport beagles. Luke wrongly assumed that Mum had obeyed his request, and one day when Virginia and I were at work, apparently Mum asked Luke to bring her toiletry bag, and sure enough, in there, wrapped tightly in layers of foil and Glad wrap to protect it from the sniffer dogs, was Mum's medicinal marijuana. Mum was always a little bit slow. She used her MS as an excuse sometimes for the time that it took her to get ready, but I have learned that even prior to her having MS, apparently she was usually the buddy that you were waiting for in her younger years. Perhaps this was in part due to ensuring her impeccable appearance was prepared. Mum's slightly slower pace wasn't always a bad thing, it was a good thing too, and as we were growing into adults, typically the only time that we really had to regularly share as a family was dinner time. And Mum's slow eating ensured that we didn't shovel and run. We typically all slow down, chew the fat together and enjoy others' company. And many jokes, of course, punctuated by her seal laugh. Mum had a few peculiar habits. She liked to collect things, coins, photos, stamps, limited edition Reader's Digest publications, which we still have, Mum, you'll be glad to know. But above all, she loved to collect spoons. Whenever she travelled, she had to collect a spoon. Even Mum's helpers were subjected to her compulsive habit. Instead of getting help with the cleaning and washing, she used to also request assistance from her helpers with sorting out her collected circulars. Mum also had a few bad habits, like eating biscuits dunked in coffee for her breakfast, going to bed late and smoking, which I'd always nag her about, but she'd just simply retort, "I feel sorry for your future wife. You're such a nagger." It might be the other way around, Mum. So, Mum was a hug lover. One of her formidable habits was ensuring that we all gave and received our daily dose of hugs. Indeed, as we grew up at 60 Mary Street, if we forgot to give Mum a hug goodnight before we went to bed, she'd scoot down the hallway, knock on our respective doors and demand one from us. Whenever things were grim, hugs would fix the problem. After an argument, hugs would help make things better. When we simply just wanted to say "I love you," we'd do it with a hug. And when you thought the hug was over, Mum's claws would dig in for an unescapable reprise. Now, before I complete what I have to say, I'd like to acknowledge that while this service may be a little slightly unconventional, maybe it's not, I don't go to many funerals, but it's of course lacking the hymns and maybe slight solemnness of a religious service, but we feel like we've attempted to craft something that we feel is most appropriate to Jenni. So while we're not going to request that you join us together in song, we do request that you all stand at this point. When you're ready and feeling relaxed, please close your eyes and adopt a comfortable stance. Take a long, deep breath. Once you've had a moment to feel your surroundings, I'd like you all to think of one positive memory that you have of Jenni. Perhaps one that makes you laugh. And after you've had a quiet little chuckle to yourself, hopefully, in your mind, I'd like you to open your eyes and turn to the person immediately adjacent to you, and in the spirit of Mum, give them a big hug. I'll give you a hug. Now, perhaps you can all take your seats again before Mum jumps out of the coffin to join in. In the later years of Mum's life, she was indeed fortunate enough to become a grandma. She loved her kids, and she certainly loved her grandkids. Over the past few years, we'd try to make it most weekends to see her so she could spend a bit of time being surrounded by them. Even though her ability to interact with them was limited, she loved to watch them. And Juliet, her eldest granddaughter of 3, would routinely bring her flowers from the garden and chops that she'd cooked on her imaginary barbecue. Even though Mum's quality of life in the final years wasn't great, seeing her occasionally enjoying the family was comforting. Following Mum's stroke, the 3 of us were appointed guardians and have been entrusted by the state to act on her behalf in her best interest. This has been a little bit tricky because the stroke eliminated her ability to effectively communicate. Emergency water. And knowing how particular Mum is, we'd often find ourselves guessing at what she'd want and what's best. So my final guess on Mum's behalf is that she'd really want us to say a few thank yous on her behalf. She'd want to thank you for all making the effort to come. She'd also want me to acknowledge all of the other people that have been special in her life, that might not have been able to make it for one reason or another, but it's okay. She's quite annoyed that she's missing out on the opportunity to catch up with you all too. Our family would like to also thank all of those who have offered messages and gifts of support at this emotional time. She'd also probably want me to acknowledge a few of the key people from her later stages of life who have supported her when she was a little more reliant on help. Not that I'll be able to cover everyone, but of course the many professional people that have helped her in the past few years, like the ambulance officers, doctors, surgeons, nursing home staff, and the list goes on. Some of the ambulance officers became quite intimately acquainted with Mum, the poor thing, because she had so many rides in them. Particularly her primary doctor, care doctor at the home, Dr. Germain, and the nursing staff at Aldersgate, several of whom she made friends with over the years. All of Mum's home helpers, there were many over the years. These helpers helped Mum with cooking and cleaning and shopping and generally whipping us kids into line. There are a few that I'd like to make special mention of now. Anne Humphreys, who was one of our first helpers, who usually helped Mum in the mornings to get us to school. Jenni Bridges, who went above the call of duty, including organising the Freemasons to help fundraise to buy our Tarago to keep the family on the road. You'll see a photo of her at that event later on. Sandra Henry, who helped us in the later years and always went above the call of duty despite her bad hip to make sure Mum and us and all of us were organised. And Julie Denman, who went above the call of duty to help Mum in the later years. She'd want me to thank her friends, the company of which Mum always relished for your love and support. Her sister and brother, Anna Graham, and Graham's wife, Rosalie, for their lifelong love and support of their sister and sister-in-law. We'd also like to make a particular mention of her sister Anne, who has made it, and who has visited Mum nearly 5 days a week for the past 6 years while she was at Aldersgate. Her kids and their partners, that's us, little pat on the back. And of course, last but not least, Luke Lodenstein, Mum's partner. As previously mentioned, Mum met Luke in 2004. Luke's a top bloke who became a great friend of our mother and as well as becoming part of our wider family. My future brother-in-law, other Luke, refers to him as a man with old world values. Luke was a perfect fit for Mum. He's an intelligent bloke who likes to talk, just like Mum, and who has a very easygoing nature. He was never too fussed about how long Mum might take to do things. He'd just take it easy and do some reading of the paper or have a coffee until she was ready to go. Unlike other blokes who might have faded into the background after their life partner had suffered such a severe stroke, Luke stayed by Mum's side right until her very last breath, helping us kids to try what we could to do to ensure Mum's post-stroke life was fulfilled as much as it could be. Luke, we love you, as did our Mum. And a quick thanks, of course, to Mum, because, well, if she wasn't here, we wouldn't be here. Thanks for bringing us into the world and somehow managing to help us grow into generally useful adults. We see characteristics of you, as I've described earlier, in all of us, good or bad, they'll continue to remind us of you. I guess by being, in some ways, your living legacy, it's up to us now to refine and perpetuate your formidable characteristics, not the dunking the biscuits in the coffee, which we'll try to do now, of course, in your absence and for the benefit of future generations. Of course, the most important of these that we've learned from you is the ability to love and be loved. Mum, farewell, we love you.
Oh, Nick, that was beautiful, and no need to worry that you'd never done that before at any funeral, let alone your own mother's. As a mother, I can only imagine how proud she would be of you. Thank you. So, Jenni's family, the kids, have lovingly put together a photo presentation. While death is sad, remembering is not sad, so let's just take a few moments to pause and reflect and give thanks for beautiful Jenni as we share snapshots of her life.
Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while. Heaven can wait, we're only watching the skies. Hoping for the best, but expecting the worst. Are you gonna drop the bomb or not? Let us die young, let us live forever. Don't have the power, but we never say never. Sitting in the sandpit, life is a short trip. Music's for the sad.
Thanks so much for putting that beautiful, beautiful memoir together, guys. Beautiful. Could I ask you please to stand for the final word farewell to Jenni? Thoughtfully and with appreciation, we say our final farewell to Jenni. We've had the opportunity to share moments of Jenni's life, the gifts she has left to her family and friends, the richness of her talents, and the love for her family. To you, Nick, Jess, and Ren, you each have something of Jenni's that has been handed down. She would want you to continue her legacy, remaining close to each other and working hard to achieve your dreams. Your success will be her success. As long as you remember her, she will never truly be lost. She'll always be near. In the words of A.A. Milne, if ever there is a tomorrow when we're not together, there is something you must always remember. Even if we're apart, I'll always be with you. As long as we're apart together, we shall certainly be fine. Jenni, rest assured in the knowledge that you live on in the hearts of your family and friends. We give thanks for your life and remember you with deep gratitude. Now the time has come to farewell Jenni's earthly body and to commit it to nature in all its cycles. Jenni, when we are weary and in need of strength, when we are lost and sick at heart, we remember you. When we have a joy we crave to share, when we have decisions that are difficult to make, when we have achievements that are based on yours, we remember you. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember you. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember you. At the rising of the sun and at its setting, we remember you. As long as your children live, you too will live, for you are now part of them. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sunshine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. Until we meet again, farewell, Jenni. May your soul now rest in peace. Thank you. Please be seated. I'd just like to leave you with one final thought. When someone you love becomes a memory, that memory becomes a treasure.
They're beautiful flowers. There's an opportunity to step forward, and perhaps this is a moment that you can place a sprig of rosemary, perhaps offer your own personal goodbye, and then I'll offer... Oh, sorry, I'm falling a bit. There's an opportunity to join together in our lounge for a drink, chat, and can I encourage you to use this time to share your own memories of Jenni and keep her alive in your own hearts. Thank you.
Flocking to the sea, crowds of people wait for me. Seagulls scavenge still ice cream, worries vanish within my dream. I left my soul there, down by the sea. I lost control here, living free. I left my soul there, down by the sea. I lost control here, living free. boats sail past the shore. No singing, Mayday anymore. The sun is shining, the water's clear. Just you and I walk along the pier. I left my soul there, down by the sea. Lost control here, living free. Left my soul there, down by the sea. Lost control here, living free. A cool breeze flows behind the wasp. Some get stung, it's worth the cost. I'd love to stay. The city calls me home.